As we all know, Canada has had a few rough years in its international economic relations. We've gone from one challenge and crisis to the next. We're living in a climate crisis, which not only means that our country regularly goes up in flames, but also that many countries are in the long term trying to wean themselves off our main export, fossil fuels. We recently experienced the COVID-19 pandemic, which not only taught us how dependent we are on far-flung supply chains, but also that we cannot rely on our closest ally and trading partner, the United States, to give us access to life-saving vaccines in an emergency. And we've been witnessing the astonishing rise of China as an industrial powerhouse and economic competitor to the West, which prompts us to ask, is there anything we manufacture that sooner or later China will not be able to do and more cheaply? But most importantly, we're facing a fundamentally changed United States. A United States whose president has said to our prime minister to his face that he doesn't want our cars or anything else that we produce for that matter. How do you negotiate with someone who thinks they don't need anything from you? It's also a United States that does not regard the trade agreements that it has concluded as worth the paper they're written on. These are agreements that Canada has relied on for decades to give it access to its most important market. We are now learning that those agreements do not provide the protection that we thought they would. We are, as our moderator has already said, at a hinge moment in the Prime Minister's words, and it's the most important hinge moment in international economic relations since the early 1990s, when the NAFTA was concluded and the World Trade Organization established. The old order is being destroyed, or at least severely damaged, and it's not clear that a new order is emerging. We see commentators grasping for new paradigms, a new economic nationalism, self-reliance, economic security. I want to suggest to you that there's no single answer to what is happening. Instead, we see the ground shifting along multiple dimensions simultaneously, and the challenge for us is to keep these multiple dimensions into view and not seize on one of them as a universal explanation for what's happening. I like to deploy the image of a kaleidoscope, because as you look at a subject matter and you turn it, you see the subject matter from a new angle. We have to keep turning the kaleidoscope and looking at this new complexity. So the challenge is not so much to find a single answer, it's to ask the right questions. What are the questions that can help us make sense of the new disorder? I want to suggest that there are four. The first change that we're seeing is along the trade objectives that countries have. So why are they regulating trade? The second change that we're seeing is in the way they think about their trading partners. The third change concerns the product and services that countries are willing to trade with each other. And the fourth change, a fundamental change, is the tools that they're willing to deploy for these objectives. So we're seeing a change in the purposes of trade policy, in the partners that countries are willing to trade with, in the products and services that they're trading, and in the tools that they're deploying. So let's look at those four changes in Canada's trade policy. Canada, like many other countries, used to prioritize liberalizing trade in order to benefit Canadian workers and consumers. In recent years, we have seen a number of other purposes supersede this trade liberalization objective. For a year now, Canada has been levying 100% tariffs on electric vehicles from China in order to protect Canada's fledgling EV industry. It has been prioritizing the prospect of manufacturing workers in Canada over Canadians' access to electric vehicles. We also see a new focus on resilience. Canada has been trying very hard to build up vaccine manufacturing capacity so that we will never again be dependent on the United States, and has been doing so at vast economic expense. And we also see security taking a new prominence as an objective of trade policy. Canada has been rejecting investment and equipment from China, such as, for example, 5G communications equipment from Huawei, on security grounds, even though that equipment would have been the most affordable and best equipment. So we're seeing a multiplying range of trade policy objectives. Along with that, we're also seeing fundamentally new thinking about trading partners. Our approach used to be that we were willing to trade and build up interdependencies with virtually every country. Now we are taking a much more cautious approach. We are trying to reduce our reliance on the United States, while at the same time trying to avoid the pitfalls of deep integration with our second largest trading partner, China, because we are worried about economic coercion and security risks. So instead, we're seeing Canada conducting intense outreach to Europe and Asian partners in order to build new partnerships, as we most recently saw at the APEC summit in Korea. So as we are rethinking our trade policy objectives and rethinking our relationships to partners, we also have to think anew about the products and services that we are willing to trade. We have to ask ourselves, what are our strengths? Our Prime Minister likes to talk about us as an energy superpower that is ready to provide resources and other commodities to the world. We have to ask ourselves, in which sectors do we want to compete? I've already mentioned Canada's electric vehicle ambitions. We have to ask ourselves, which sectors do we want to protect at all cost? We have long provided extensive protection to the dairy sector, but in light of the new objectives, security, resilience, are there other sectors that have to join that list? And finally, there will always going to be many, many products that we are going to be sourcing from other countries, where we'll be relying on the production in other countries, and many of those products will be coming from China. But we have to ask ourselves, for each of these products, are these products that we are willing to rely on from China, or do we have to turn to our allies for these products? When we think about our strengths, we have to keep in mind that Canada is first and foremost a services economy. Services account for 70% of our GDP. And as this is a Queen's event, I think we can proudly say that education services is one of our most successful exports. When a foreign student comes to Queen's for an education, or to any other Canadian university, Canada registers an inflow of foreign funds just as we would if we sent a bunch of auto parts or softwood lumber abroad. And the origin of these students is not the United States. Most of the students are coming from India, from China, from Nigeria, and the United States doesn't even make the top 10. So if we are thinking about trade diversification away from the United States, education services should be at the top of the list. So how do we take advantage of these opportunities? How do we play to our strengths? The answer is often we have to tackle our problems here at home. And that means, first and foremost, the housing crisis. If we had more housing, we would be able to welcome more foreign talent, more international students, and take advantage of the fact that the United States is not only closing its doors to foreign goods, but also to foreign people. However, as we saw in the recent budget, the government has been taking the housing crisis as a reason to reduce the number of international student permits from over 300,000 to just around 150,000. So essentially, the government is putting a hard cap on our ability to export education services. So this is just one example of how domestic policy mistakes inhibit our ability to take advantage of our international trade opportunities. There are, of course, other sectors of great promise. And in our next presentation, we're going to hear about the technology sector, and I'm very excited for that presentation. For now, I would just want to sum up. What are the questions that we need to be asking to make sense of the new complexity? We need to ask, why are we regulating trade now? Who are our partners? What are we willing to trade, and with whom? And how do we achieve that? The answers to these questions used to be straightforward. Why were we regulating trade? In order to achieve prosperity. With whom? With virtually everyone. Maybe not Iran, maybe not North Korea, but everybody else. And especially our strategic competitors, such as China and Russia, because we hoped that trading with them would bring them closer. That hope has now been disappointed. What were we willing to trade? Again, we were willing to trade virtually everything. Right? And we wanted to do that by concluding international agreements. In this new disorder, there are no longer any easy answers. But my hope is that asking these questions will help us give some structure to the new complexity. Thank you very much.